Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
All right, well, Alex, we are recording. Hopefully this won't be the last one for too long of a time, but as I let you know earlier, actually you heard through the grapevine earlier that, the chancellor of CU Boulder yesterday basically said that all classes are going to be taught remotely, and all events that had any kind of a audience of size were being basically canceled, and that includes the International Film Series. So I'm having to cancel screenings at the International Film Series. I haven't been given any guidance as to for how long, so for now I'm probably going to put something up on the website that lets people know that we will be canceling film screenings through the middle of April. And my hope is that by that time the landscape will change for the better, and by some miracle of maybe warm weather or progress, perhaps I shall be able to finish off the last part of the spring film series, but it is unlikely given the statistical probabilities. I'm afraid that we'll probably end up having to cancel the rest of the spring series. So that's what's happening on my end.
What a big deal. So I was going to ask you, how does that affect an exhibitor like yourself? But you've explained, it's
well, I'm in a
total shutdown.
I'm in a somewhat more well-positioned place because I have a paycheck that gets, that the university will hopefully be able to assist with the pitfalls and the budget cuts that will result. It's less interesting to talk about what's going to happen to me as a small-time exhibitor than it is to what is happening to large outfits out there, because South by Southwest, for example, they've canceled their event, and that brings in some $350 million to Austin every year, and it is having such a, from last I heard, which was for yesterday, they weren't even giving refunds, which maybe that'll change, but I've also heard that they might be at risk of just their existence. So it's an existential crisis potentially for them. Obviously, in the big picture, Austin will always be a place where someone can come in and have a festival, but the way it's affecting current companies, I just saw that Disneyland in Anaheim is closing. Other theaters like the Landmark chains, they're introducing social distancing. Ironically, the International Film Series, which holds movies in the Munzinger Auditorium with 400 seats and oftentimes shows very challenging films, like last night we had the latest film from the Belgian Dardenne brothers, and we only had some 30 people show up, so that was well below the capacity.
You could distance people very well.
Well, people could sit 30 feet apart if they wanted to. So ironically, the International Film Series has probably what would be one of the safest movie theaters in Colorado, but more theaters, other theaters don't have places of that capacity, and usually, they depend on bigger numbers of attendance to make their bottom line. So there's going to be obviously a big, a lot of folks aren't going to make the transition. A lot of businesses, a lot of companies, a lot of outfits, festivals. The Turner Classic Movies, the TCM Classic Film Fest yesterday canceled their event that was supposed to be in LA. They right out the gate said everyone who bought a pass would get a refund. So that was, they're doing it right. But and they're all
Also, I would think, I mean, TCM's core business presumably is still cable TV, isn't it? So
yeah, and they've also promised that they're still, they're actually working. They're going to start working on programming for the 2021 festivals. So they're doing a lot better than the South by Southwest on several fronts. But this is a big deal for sure.
But I have a question though. So if the chancellor announced yesterday that they were going to close the campus and everything was going to go over to the audiovisual, when did that kick in? When does that apply? What date?
Well,
immediately that minute or?
The date is Monday, this Monday, and so there's 1 week of classes left. That's next week, and so right now we've actually spent the last yesterday and today. Staff is basically trying to figure out how to help the faculty with their new needs in terms of being able to download all the stuff that they need so that they can teach remotely through what is Jason. What's the name of it?
Which one?
Yeah, it's basically Canvas. There's Zoom, and but it's basically variations of Skyping in. So students will be Skyping in with professors. Professors will be Skyping in with students, and there's obviously a big learning curve here with how to handle that. And honestly, you can only imagine, I'm sure, because you were here as a teacher for 5 years in production, how would you handle teaching students film production through Skype?
Well, I mean, the good news is if it's like advanced production, if they're already engaged in making their own film, it wouldn't be that difficult. I mean, it would be unfortunate not to see the film projected with the whole class present, but you could see the film. They would be making the film, they'd be at home with their laptop anyway by that point in the semester, and the other students could watch the film online. Professor could watch it online, give them the grade, So that kind of production class would go more easily.
Yeah.
Screenwriting would be harder, and something like the acting and directing for the camera class would be impossible because of the amount of interactivity.
Yeah.
Because that class, which I used to team teach with Chip Persons from the theatre department, was entirely interactive. It was all small groups doing little exercises. So it's interesting, the disparity between, and a conventional lecture class, the prof could drone on, and read their lecture, and the students could pretend to listen to it, as they usually do. So I don't, but what's going to happen to the dorms? Are they closing the dorms?
That's an excellent question. And I know that's a problem I've been reading about in the newspapers about some students not knowing what recourse they have. I'm not sure how CU is handling that specifically right now. There'll be more about that in the days to come in the newspapers, surely. Yeah.
I know, because Harvard has shut down, and they've just told all the students to get out. They've closed the dorms, and they're not giving the students any help with their stuff. So the students have got to ship all their gear back to, their guitars and their computers and their blacklight posters. They've got to ship them all back home at their own expense. So it's a huge problem if you're not wealthy, if you're one of the 15% of Harvard students who are there on a scholarship of some kind.
Right.
That's a huge problem.
And
how do you continue your studies when you're so disoriented that you've actually just been kicked out of your lodging? You've got to find somewhere else to live. You've got to get an airplane ticket home and deal with all that stuff.
Sure. But at the same
and study.
Yeah.
And you've also lost your work-study job that you had in working for the IFS or the
right. No, the IFS is powered by students, and they're hourly workers, and It's not a lot of money, but it's still money that can be applied toward whatever, food and rent needs they have.
Food and rent you feel like paying, yeah. Yeah, so it's a very difficult, and chaotic.
At the same time, I mean, the thing that everyone is trying their best to avoid is it's already a given that the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. And so the whole purpose of canceling stuff is to keep the outbreak from getting as widespread as it might otherwise be. I can only...
which makes perfect sense.
It makes sense from a statistical, logistical standpoint. But what's interesting is how different the landscape will be in terms of what we used to take as what was normal. Being able to go to a concert and enjoy music with other folks, and movies, of course, as we were saying, and all kinds of and restaurants, and it's going to have a massive ripple effect on many things, and we're buckle in. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because it's not knowable how long the pandemic will endure. And as you say, I mean, it's like people don't have a lot of leeway. People who are working in a work-study job, or working as an adjunct or a member of staff at CU, or most people don't have a lot of savings. How do they survive if they have to go home and just not leave?
Well, that's we're suddenly seeing some of the big drawbacks to. I mean, it was always a drawback to have a paycheck-to-paycheck existence, but now the crisis is. It's going to be a crisis, and it's going to get. It's going to be. I can't even fathom how far this will go necessarily. And if you don't have insurance and you suddenly, there's all kinds of calamities that might come. Or who knows, maybe the warm weather these preventative measures will help blunt the impact that's expected, and warm weather will bring good tidings. We'll see. Already, though, I'm hearing...
Or maybe it isn't, although it is terrible that, the people who die of coronavirus and the people whose lives are completely disrupted. But in terms of the environment, the absence of, the amount of pollution we're not pumping into the atmosphere right now, and finally they're grounding these airplanes which were flying back and forth empty so they wouldn't lose their landing rights.
Yeah.
It's actually the slowing down the insatiable grind of capitalism and of consumerism and of growth. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. Well,
so it's interesting. And if we had universal healthcare, universal free healthcare, then we would probably have a system set up to test and, with luck, vaccinate everybody.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't do that just for people with insurance.
Right.
Or for people who are citizens. You have to do it for everybody, because it's like not vaccinating people for polio or something because they were not virtuous enough.
Well, how it's been widely reported how Steven Soderbergh's film Contagion, which came out 9 years ago, is it's now on top of the charts for streaming. Everyone's kind of checking it out. The screenwriter recently mentioned, though, that even though he wrote that script in 2009 or 2010, that our position right now is far worse than in terms of our ability to meet the crisis of a pandemic. It's far worse now than it was back in 2009, 2010 when he was writing the plot for Contagion. And largely for the fact that a lot of the budget for the CDC was cut, And
Yeah, and last year, and this can be blamed on our glorious president. I mean, he cancelled the guys who were sitting there in their offices waiting for a pandemic to happen. He goes, there's never going to be a pandemic, sack them, you know. And, and that was in 2018. That was done in 2018. So
yeah, well, hopefully we'll be paying attention to the lessons that are there to be learned from the changes in our living patterns to come. I'm sad that I can't share, a lot of great movies that were planned, but at the same time, So someone said that this was all potentially the COVID-19 was a secret plot by Netflix to ensure that everybody would be stuck at home watching movies. So I'm obviously mentioning what was a joke, but it will have that effect, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens.
But yeah, I mean, I think in the end, it's all things must pass, you know. I mean, it's going to be enormously disrupting, and to try and look on the bright side, which is that we don't have to engage ourselves in such frivels as we sometimes did. There aren't so many containers, bound for us with little shiny electric things,
Well, the global economy is certainly one of the things that is sort of put to the fore in terms of how everything is so interrelated now that if you disrupt one country, it actually affects the product line for everything everywhere else.
And it's a little bit like the crisis of capitalism, that we see in the choice between the two democratic contenders. But also, capitalism, neoliberalism face this real crisis because of coronavirus, because they got a choice. If they want to save the economy and get the economy back on track before everything goes crashing down, then they've got to end the shutdown as soon as possible. They've got to declare coronavirus beaten and get all those planes flying again. Yeah. Or if they want to save people, then they have to maintain the lockdown and provide us with universal health care.
Well, Alex, those are some tall orders, and I think we're coming up on our time. I'm going to just say that I really hope that people understand that there are things more important than money, and you have a little tagline at the end of your email. Remind us what that says.
Oh, what is it? It's something that Martin Luther King said. What does he say?
We must learn to live together as brothers, or we shall
we must learn to live together
fools.
as brothers, or else we will perish together as fools.
Yep. That is definitely...
That's definitely true.
Yep, that's the message for now.
It was true when he said that in 1966, or whatever it was, and it's even truer now. So he was a very smart guy.
Well, folks listening out there, wash your hands, take care of each other, and I wish we could say that we'd see you at the movies, but at this point, those are, at least at the International Film Series, on hold until I get further news and see what happens with the things to come.
And we'll see what happens in things to come. It'll be very interesting. And thank you very much for a lovely chat where we didn't talk about films at all, except for the IFS. That was fascinating.
Well,
for me, at least, not for anybody else. But
given that I won't be promoting any future films, maybe we'll be talking about totally different things when I call you next. We shall see.
Okay. Well, I look forward to our next chat.
Okay, sir. Take care.
Cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations. Don't forget to go out there and watch movies in a larger-than-home venue. It's what brings us all together to see movies the way they were meant to be seen, on the big screen, as we sit next to strangers, neighbors, and friends.